Medical school and residency are really hard to get into, but having a really good interview can help you get in. Luckily for you, I'm here to give you 5 tips on how to have a wonderful interview experience. Now, the first tip is to make sure that you find hard, reliable questions to practice with. Where do you find hard questions from? Well, I would first ask previous students. So if you have any students that are ahead of you that have already gotten into residency, they are the first place to look. They will tell you all the questions that they've just been asked. That means these questions are recent. That means these questions are real. So they are a great resource for questions. I would also ask professors and mentors. Professors are awesome because they, as doctors themselves, might remember questions that they were asked. As part of faculty, they also might be currently part of the admissions committee for your school, which means that they know current questions. They may also offer to help you with other parts of your application, like your CV or your essay, and it's always great to have those people on board to help. You can also look online or on YouTube for awesome YouTubers who are sharing questions that they had. You can also try going to the library and looking at interviewing books. Believe it or not, they do exist. And this last bullet here is weakness. What does that mean? It means that you need to really take a look at your CV or resume and try to find all of your weaknesses. Turn those weaknesses into questions. For example, you failed organic chemistry sophomore year. The question would be, why did you fail organic chemistry sophomore year? Now, these questions are gonna be hard, but that is the point. You have to practice with hard questions to get really good at interviews. The next tip is to identify your true weaknesses. How do you find out what your weaknesses are, right? Well, I like to think of weaknesses in 3 different categories. Being a non-traditional student, having imperfect academics, and having moral or ethical violations on your record. Now, non-traditional, to put it simply, means that you graduated from high school at 18 years of age. You then went straight into 4-year undergraduate program, only 4 years. And after that, you went straight into medical school for 4 years only. And after 4 years of medical school, you went straight into residency. That, my friends, is the traditional path to medicine. Any deviation from that means you are non-traditional. So, gap year, any years off that you took from school, you're non-traditional. If you have had a non-science major, you're also non-traditional. If you have ever had a previous career other than medicine, you're also considered non-traditional. And if you're older or younger than the average applicant. This goes back to the gap year, right? So if you're older or younger than everybody else, you either took a gap year or somehow you were able to skip grades. Both of those situations are non-traditional. I personally don't agree that non-traditional should make you a weak applicant. But in this day and age, lots of admission committees unfortunately still think that's the case. It's not fair, but the good thing is that you can change these non-traditional weaknesses into strengths, which I will show you later in the video. Imperfect academics also weaken your application. If you've made a C or lower in any class from undergraduate school and beyond, if you've ever been on academic probation, if your GPA on average is less than 3.5, or if it's significantly lower than the average GPA of the school you're applying to, or if you've ever withdrawn from any classes. All of those things give you imperfect academics, and that is a sign of a weakness in your application. Now, the last thing, moral and ethical violations. That means any disciplinary action either taken by the school or taken legally against you. These are things that are actually on your record. So if you got a speeding ticket and it's not on your academic or your legal record, then you don't need to worry about it. But if you were caught cheating in school and you had to be in front of a disciplinary committee and they suspended you for 3 weeks, unfortunately, that is something you're gonna have to talk about. That does make you a weaker candidate. Now, I recommend at this point stopping the video and literally making a list of all your weaknesses. It's really gonna help you go forward with the next step, which is to turn those weaknesses into strengths. But how do you do that? Depending on what type of weakness it is, there are 2 key ways to turn them into strengths. One is that the weakness still exists, but somehow it makes you a better person. Or two, the weakness is in the past, it's been overcome, but somehow in the process of overcoming the weakness, you become a better person. Either way, what we're going for is an overall positive experience, meaning that every question they throw at you, no matter how it starts, is going to end on a positive note. Let's do a couple of examples. Let's say you're a dance major. A dance major is not a science major, non-traditional, that's a weakness. They're probably going to ask you about it. And when they do, here's how you need to change it into a strength. You could say something like, as a dance major, I had to learn the value of communication. My dance team and I had to communicate verbally and non-verbally during shows and during practice to make sure everybody was getting their parts done. I'm gonna take those communication skills with me when I become a doctor. That's gonna help me communicate better with patients and communicate better with my team. I'll be able to empathize more. I'll be able to judge based on body language more how my patients feel when it's hard for them to talk to me. I will be a better communicator because I was a dance major. I will be a better doctor because I was a dance major. So you can see how the question started out maybe negative, but I was able to change it into something positive. Let's try another example. Let's say that you failed organic chemistry as a sophomore. It doesn't exist anymore, right? You have since retaken the class and passed it. Here's how you can spin it to make it a strength. I failed organic chemistry my sophomore year. What I decided to do was make a study group. I didn't know anybody in the class at first, but I went ahead and I asked people after class if they wanted to join, and the study group became really popular. By the end of the class, not only had I improved my grade, but the TA himself came to ask me to continue helping to organize study groups for the next semester. I've learned the value of asking for help and of studying with people, of reaching out and not holding everything on my shoulders. When we work together, we can accomplish so much more than when we work by ourselves. And there you have it, 2 weaknesses that were steered around into strengths. There are infinite ways you can turn those weaknesses into strengths. These were just a couple of examples. But think about what makes a good doctor and think about how you can turn each one of your weaknesses into a strength by either showing how it makes you a better candidate or showing how it has revealed a valuable lesson for you and has helped you grow as a person. Now, we've talked about how to create positivity with your answers. The next tip is to create a positive atmosphere with your body language. And this is interesting because a lot of people don't think they have problems with body language. You know, I always look pleasant, I always look professional, I always look nice. My shoes are shined, I look great. But there's a lot of nuances that people really take for granted that can make them look scared, make them look aggressive, or just make them look mean. To combat that, don't forget to smile. There are lots of people who get into interviews and they turn into robots. They don't move their bodies at all and they don't smile. And it's very, very strange not to smile. Now, of course, only smile when it's appropriate, but a little smile while you're talking can go a long way to helping the interviewer feel comfortable and to, again, reinforcing that positivity. Don't forget to move naturally. Again, if you look like a robot, if you're stiff, it's gonna make the interviewers think that you're timid or that you're scared. And we don't want timid or scared doctors or surgeons on our team. How do you move naturally? Well, here are some tips. First of all, use gestures. Try to use your hands to explain concepts. If you're talking about your research, you better use your hands to talk about how amazing it is. Now, don't go overboard with the gestures. You should not be gesturing with every single thing that you say. But throwing in a few gestures here and there to emphasize important points can really go a long way to helping you look confident in the interview. Make sure that you lean in when the interviewer is telling you something interesting and that you lean back when you have the floor. Leaning back conveys confidence. Leaning forward conveys that you're interested. Also, one way to look more casual is to cross your legs occasionally. You can cross your ankles, you can cross your knees. I would not put an ankle on the knee. I think that's maybe a little too casual. Crossing your legs here and there shows that you feel comfortable enough in the interview room to make yourself feel comfortable. And it's just a little tip there in case you do have robot syndrome to try to look a little more calm. Now, the next tip here is huge. You need to practice. Let me repeat that. You need to practice. You need to practice. You need to practice. This is one thing that many people mess up on. They don't practice. Now, there are lots of reasons people don't want to practice interviews. The biggest one is it's scary. It's super scary to sit there and have to look at your weaknesses and explain them all. You're not sure if you're doing a good job. You know there's 2,000 other students that you're competing with, and it's just scary. Nobody wants to do that. But if you do it, you are gonna outshine your peers. You are gonna have an amazing interview if you prepare for the worst. That being said, practice is completely useless without feedback. Now, there are two key ways to get feedback. One is to film yourself, and this is a form of self-feedback. Now, remember, I said that most people don't like practicing, and if the idea of filming yourself is freaking you out, it's supposed to. The second way is to practice with a partner. This is a form of getting feedback from others. Again, very nerve-wracking, I know. So, filming yourself. Filming helps to provide the nervous environment that we all love. This is also a great way to check your body language. We don't know if we're stiff like robots until we actually see a film showing that we're stiff like robots. When you film yourself and you're talking out loud, you can also make sure that you're not saying a lot of filler words like, well. A lot of times we don't even know that we're making these sounds until we're on camera and can actually hear it. And you definitely don't want to be like the one person who says all the time, because saying too much just makes you sound a little less educated. It makes you sound nervous. It makes it seem like you don't have a big vocabulary. And I know that's hard to hear because a lot of us do say a lot, but in your interviews, the professional way is to just take those fillers out. The only way you're gonna get good at not using fillers is to practice. Practicing with other people can take two different forms. You can either practice with a person casually, or you can have what's called a mock interview. The mock interview means that you are doing a full-on dress rehearsal. You are wearing your interview suit. You are talking to someone that might be a stranger to you. They are asking you questions that you're not prepared for. That's the mock interview. Doing either one is going to create that interview environment, especially if it is a mock interview. You'll be able to test out your interview clothes, again, if you're doing the mock interview. And this is important because a lot of people underestimate the interview attire. They will buy new clothes the day before the interview or the week before, and they think everything's fine until it's the day of the interview and they're walking for 8 hours taking tours, and all of a sudden their leather shoes are so loose that they're falling off or they're getting blisters. And that is not very comfortable, and it's definitely not going to help you do well in your interview. Also, you don't want clothes that are too tight. If you're sweating a lot because your shirt is synthetic, these things are important to know beforehand, and you can figure that out with the mock interview. Mock interviews and practice interviews are also great because you can get surprise questions. Your interviewer, as another person, is going to ask you questions you're not prepared for. Ask them to do that. Encourage them to do that. It'll help you practice the skill of thinking on your feet. And that's also very important for interviews because you're going to get questions that you're not expecting. Of course, mock interviewing and practice interviewing gives you that valuable feedback from others, because we might think that we look great, but a friend can help point out things that maybe aren't so great. We might think that the outfit we're wearing is appropriate and professional, but they might be able to point out the mustard stain that is darker than we thought it was. Now, those were my 5 tips today. However, I do have one extra one that I want to share with you, and that is to read over your CV and make a list of what makes you great. This is so important. I want you to make a list so that you can remember why you're amazing. Do this after every single interview practice. This is so important to help your confidence and your self-esteem stay high. Practicing for interviews is tough on your emotions. You have to list your weaknesses, and then you have to defend your weaknesses, and it just seems like it's so much negativity. Remembering your strengths, remembering the positives will help you stay confident throughout the interview season. I actually recommend keeping this list and taking it with you to the interview and reading over it right before you go into the room. This will keep those strengths fresh on your mind. It'll help you to steer each question towards your strengths, and it'll give you that confidence and that positivity throughout the interview itself. Well, I hope you enjoyed these tips, and thank you for watching. I wish you all the best of luck on your interviews.